here I'm representing a Christian position. I am a Christian, and so I'll speak to you not what Christians more generally believe, because I don't think that there is such a thing, what Christians generally believe, but I'm going to be talking to you specifically what I believe. There are varieties of version of this, and I was reminded of it just the other day. I was talking to my wife about her mother's, writing a little bit of a biography of her own, which centered around her mother's faith. And my wife told me, this is a really beautiful dress that she has kind of crafted in her own biography. Her faith is so marvelous, except that I could never inhabit that faith. And my wife is a Christian, but she just doesn't quite know how she would fit into that type of Christianity that her mother's faith represents. So I will present for you the type of Christianity in which I relatively comfortably fit. So I'll speak without giving you reasons for that, simply what I take to be Christian faith. And also I will try to do that by answering 7 questions that you are asking regularly and answering them in that order. So, first, responsibility. To whom do I feel responsible? I think at some basic level, I feel responsible even to those for whom I am responsible. Example being my little daughter. I am responsible for her, but I feel responsible also to her. I want her to grow up thinking that her father was at least a little bit admirable. If I can do better than that, that would be even better. But she has a claim upon the shape of my life. I think the same is true of my family, my set of friends that surround me. They have a claim, they have investment in my life, they have claim on my life. I feel that I'm responsible to them. But as a Christian, I must also say that I feel most responsible to God. That is kind of the big responsibility that encompasses all other responsibility. Now that's kind of a little bit strange to go my daughter, my friends, and then suddenly this humongous jump to God that seems unrelated, transcendent God to the ordinary things of the world. And yet when I say that I feel responsible to God, I feel responsible to the one who is invested in the life of all of the creatures. And invested in, I think, a very particular kind of a way. It is a strange thing to say, but it has been said by none less than Archbishop of Canterbury. So it's kind of official, semi-official. That is that God does not have particular interests. God's interest is the whole, and interest of particulars within that whole, which is to say, when I say that I feel responsible to God, that in the sense that is to thematize my sense of responsibility for the entirety of what is. That's a humongous responsibility in some ways, but nonetheless, that's the one that is rooted in the character of God. Human being. Who are we as human beings? I take it that we human beings are kind of human animals living in symbiotic relationship with all the rest of the creatures upon this planet. Significant features of us is that we are born and that we die and that we live our lives on the trajectory between these two. I think that often in philosophical tradition, death looms much more very largely in terms of how we perceive ourselves. We are beings that are headed toward the end of our lives, and that end throws shadow upon who we are entirety of our lives. That's true. But it's also true that we are defined by our birth, which is to say we are creatures of the beginnings. And that's the idea some of you will maybe recognize associated with philosopher Hannah Arendt, who speaks about natality. We start and we begin And this natality describes us as creatures over the period of time. Living toward that, we always bring something new into the world. Between this newness and this ever getting old is how we lead our lives. The second feature of human beings that I want to emphasize, and obviously we could give a lecture on human beings the whole semester, right? But second quick feature that I want to recognize is that I consider human beings each equally loved by God, who has no particular interest and no particular favorites. That is to say, consequently, that our worth and our humanity, and this may be a strange idea, but it's really fundamental to how I think, our worth and our humanity is not defined either by what we have done over the period of time, nor by what others have done to us over the period of time, nor what we have done with what we are done and others have done to us as we process that in our lives. All of this is an important part of our story. What others do to us, what we do, how we relate to both of these things. They're fundamental to who we are. And yet, we are not fully defined by that. We are always more than that. We are always transcending that. And I think that is expressed with the idea that our worth comes from being objects of God's love. We are cherished no matter who and what we are, as long as we are human. We are to be related to as equally valuable as anybody else. That's going to have a significant implications, for instance, for what we do with failure, and I'm come to that later on, because it bears upon the question of forgiveness. The next point is agency. For me, that's relatively simple. There are these two great commandments, and I think for today's reading, it was what you have read for Mark's Gospel 12. One commandment is you shall love God with all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your strength, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now behind this, especially behind the first commandment, you shall love God above all things, lies the commandment or the opening of the space of unheard of possibility in some ways to, as Church Father Augustine has put it, when we love God and when we love neighbors properly, we actually are loving love with capital L. Because in Christian tradition, as you are familiar, God is defined as love. And when we love God, we love what God loves, and we love the way in which God loves what God loves. One more time. When we love God, we love that which God loves, objects of God's love, and we love in the way in which God loves. That is to say, loving love, both what love loves and how God loves, defines our agency. Now, a few words about love. How is it that God loves? And I want to make a distinction, a very simple distinction it is, but it goes back to the 16th century reformer Martin Luther, who speaks about two kinds of love. One love is appetitive love. It satisfies our appetite, is the love that desires. That is to say, love that sees something that is beautiful, and that beauty triggers attraction to that love, and one loves beautiful things because they're beautiful. Now, implication is once they cease to be beautiful, then the implication might be you might cease also to be attracted to them and to love them as well. The other way to think about love is what one might call bestowing love. I love something because it is simply, it's worthy, whether it's worthy or not of my love, whether it's beautiful or not, And my desire is to make that which I love to flourish, to thrive. So that's the love that doesn't find simply what is beautiful, but also that invests and makes the other person beautiful. You can call it a kind of a creative love as well. It seems to me that what ought to characterize our lives, at least so I think as a Christian, are both of these kinds of love. We respond to beauty and we seek to increase the beauty, and both forms of love are the center of our agency. Okay, circumstances is the next one. I'll be relatively short with that. I think that thriving is what God of the Bible is after, thriving of all creatures and thriving of all creature in community together, kind of symbiotic thriving, if you want. And that's connected with the earlier point of God having no particular interest, but interest of God is the flourishing of the entirety of creation. Now, you might also have then to ask, well, what about particular circumstances, and make decision with regard to that. But nonetheless, you're going to be concerned not just for your little set of circumstances, but with concern for your little set of circumstances, or I'll put it in first person singular, as I promised I would, with my interest in my little set of circumstances, I have to be interested in all sets of circumstances that are here on this planet. That's what I am committed to as the one who believes that God created the world, sustains the world, and wishes world's flourishing. Now, the third aspect of the good life is kind of the emotional aspect, affective aspect, and I do believe that the signature emotion of the Christian faith is, as I see it, joy. Now, I think prior to saying that joy is the crown of the good life, which I like to say, I think it's very important to say that kind of most fundamentally, what is essential for us to be attuned to the circumstances that we encounter. So that might require sorrow, that might require a grief, that might require anger also as appropriate emotions, depending on what circumstances of the world one finds before oneself. But in terms of kind of telos, where one aims to be, I think signature emotion is joy. And by joy, I don't mean simply a kind of sense of some kind of positive emotion of satisfaction, or some kind of a positive emotion of pleasure that might be detachable from concrete circumstances or concrete aspects of circumstances in which one finds oneself. I think that joy is a response to the good that one finds, and then affirms that goodness, and then creates in one a certain sense of delight. That's why you can't take a joy pill. You can take a pill that'll make you feel good, but you can't take a pill that would make you rejoice. Rejoicing is indexed always to the particular set of circumstances and your sense of contentment and delight in those sets of circumstances. Now, I speak of joy being elicited by circumstances, but joy is also, there's something active about joy. There's something active about rejoicing. In other words, we can nurture our emotions in such a way that responses that we identify the goods and then nurture ourselves into rejoicing over them rather than complaining, for instance, that there are not more of them, right? That's also a possible response. And I think one of the signature Christian virtues, which is kind of at odds with most of how the modernity has functioned, is something that one can describe as contentment. And as soon as I say that, I immediately know, well, I'll put it to you this way. I have once sung praises of contentment in a Facebook post. I have never received as much abuse on social media, when I tweeted about Trump or whatever else I've said. But contentment was most disputed topic that I could ever have addressed. And I can understand partly why, right? Because when you speak about contentment, especially if you're a white guy like I am and teach at Yale, then people might think, well, it's easy for you to think about or write about contentment. How about you change my position and then see what kind of tweet you're going to post into the world. I get it. I take it. That seems significant. At the same time, I want still to, I don't know whether defend maybe is not the right word, but sing a little bit of praise and then see whether it makes sense to you, of contentment and joy in what is. One of my favorite lines in all literature comes early on in Dante's Paradiso. And you have in Dante's Paradiso, you have all these different souls who are in paradise, but they're all on different stages, right? They're depending on how close they are to God. That's how they are arranged in hierarchical order. And then the question becomes, well, how can those souls that are on the lowest rank be content, be satisfied, be actually in paradise when they see up above them all those who somehow are much more hierarchically much higher than they are? And the response that question is asked, and then the response of those souls is, we long for what we have. Now, we're used to longing for what we don't have. And we think we don't have to long for what we have. And yet, unless you long for what you have, pretty soon it's going to become a discarded toy. And you won't be able to truly enjoy it. It's kind of a longing for the good that is here present to us, I think is a fundamental stance toward life. And I think if you want to think in terms of practices that nurture that, I think one of the most important practices, and you've talked about it, I'm sure, when you talked about Judaism, is Sabbath. And one aspect of the Sabbath is to take one day to enjoy what is. 6 days, work hard as you want. Kill yourself over work, improve, go. But one day, celebrate simply what is, the good that is there. I think that's the feature of joy. It celebrates the good that it experiences, identifies it, and celebrates the good that it experiences. What do we do in failure? That's our next point. For one, I think failure doesn't have the last word about you. You're not defined either by your success. If you're not defined by your success, you're not defined by your failure. That's a kind of important piece that goes back to understanding of humanity as not made up, our worth not being made up of deeds and or sufferings that we endure. We have value and we can have kind of integrity notwithstanding the failure. And connected with that, I think, is the idea of sometimes failure is not failure in achieving goals that we have set for ourselves in various domains of life. Sometimes failure concerns very intimate relationship with people that we love. We harm them, we hurt them. And then the question becomes, how do we reset the relationship? How do we attend to our own failure in having wronged them in significant ways? And how do we somehow build a bridge to the other person after the failure has occurred? And I think here the signature practice for Christian tradition is that of forgiveness. When I forgive someone, I basically, that's my read of it. There are many, again, whole lecture series can be done on forgiveness and the different accounts of forgiveness. But my read of forgiveness is when I forgive, I don't count the transgression that somebody has done against me against them. I identify it as wrong, but don't count it against the person. Release them of the burden of the harm that they have, of the consequence of the harm that they have done toward me. And I think that is a kind of a gift that we give to a person to release them, to detach the deed that they have committed from them. And that is a kind of crazy idea when you think about it, right? Well, if you've done a deed, you've done it. You can make it undone. Time does not run backwards. It sticks to you. And the miracle of forgiveness, I'll call it that way because it is. The miracle of forgiveness, miracle you can do almost every day. Miracle of forgiveness is that you can kind of peel off the wrongdoing from the person and concentrate on loving the person and release them from that. That opens up the space in which that person can, and wrongdoers and wrong person can come back to one another and reconcile. Finally, suffering. What do we do with suffering? Well, we fight against it, right? We try to diminish it. And I think central question, I think for us often is, what do we do with suffering and what do we do in suffering which we cannot avoid? That is to say, we are stuck in a situation in which we inescapably suffer. To love often is to suffer, to be human is often to suffer in ways that we cannot insulate ourselves from. And some of us suffer in horrendous kinds of ways. And the challenge then becomes what one can do. That can one preserve one's own humanity? Can one preserve the vision of the beauty of the world even in such suffering in which one finds oneself? That was a very important question for many of the folks who have written about their Holocaust experience in concentration camps. Primo Levi was one of the most important writers. If you haven't read Primo Levi, please do. He's absolutely splendid. And one of the things with which he has wrestled, especially upon his return from Auschwitz, was, and he describes it, that in the middle of the kind of ordinary Italian landscape and household and familial kind of setting, suddenly he would have these intrusive images of his experiences in lager. He thinks, or in his concentration camp, he thinks of it as a dream in a dream. He's dreaming, he's in this beautiful setting, and suddenly, slowly, the experiences of a concentration camp takes over, and he is back to where he was, and he has a sense that it's this negative experience that defines the entirety of the reality for him. And that's what I want to just identify for you. Very often when we have experiences, negative experiences, there is something like self-inflation of the negative. Negative looms larger often than the positive. And there are good reasons, psychological reasons for that, because it's kind of protective mechanism. But it often doesn't serve us well, so that we can discover, even in the midst of difficulty and suffering, the goodness that is foundation of the entire reality. And that's what I think, for me, the faith in God gives. God is the creator, and as such, the creation, goodness is primordial and always greater than anything bad that can happen or evil that can happen. This kind of primordial character of goodness and unconditional love is why I am a Christian. Thank you. I'd say that this creative love is better. I think in Christian tradition it describes God, right? It's because by definition, God, there's nothing, before God creates, there's nothing for God to love, except love within God. So God creates something so that it can be object of God's love. So the creative character of love, it seems to me very, very important. But on the other hand, sometimes I think that's like choosing which of your children do you like better? because I think both kinds of loves are important. If you don't appreciate kind of the beauty that you find for the beauty that it is, if God were to not delight in the creation, but just do good for the creation, there would be something deficient about that kind of love. And I think also in our human lives, a kind of love that simply responds to the beauty is kind of parasitic in a sense. It's self-interested, too kind of a bit sullied by its own, so to say, beauty, right? Because it just stays with the goodness rather than staying with the person or with the thing that is good, right? And this bestowing love is actually stays with the thing that is either good or not so good, right? And as you see, it resonates with the idea of that we aren't the sum of our deeds, so that when I see you, I'll read your resume and see whether I'm impressed, and then I think, oh, cool, I like this person much better than some other person. Bestowing love doesn't think that way. Bestowing love thinks, nope, it's you that I'm interested in, not any of the qualities that you have. And to me, that's amazingly beautiful and deeply, deeply human. Does it de facto change? In my experience, yes. I'm not, if I have to forgive somebody 3 times, that's a little bit too much for me already, right? So should it change? Well, if I'm truly committed to that person, I should work so that it doesn't, right? And often, especially our long-term, more intimate relationship, sometimes a kind of one little wrongdoing, not very big ones, but often the little ones are harder to forgive, especially when when they multiply, when they set certain kinds of patterns, right? And that's possibly behind the question that you are asking. Then one forgives, stays by one's commitment, and that's part of that bestowing, gift giving, a love, and not simply beauty recognizing and therefore ugliness shunning kind of love. That's very good. Wonderful, wonderful question. Then you're in the same situation than you are by longing what you don't have, right? Because you potentially never have that, what you have, right? That's one of the central questions, and often debated precisely in the tradition of thinking about the nature of love, and how strong. It was formulated often in the Christian tradition as how strong should our investments be in the particular persons or things that we love. And there are varieties of responses to that question. My own sense is that that I can love properly the other person only if I'm not so dependent on that person that I'm totally devastated at a loss, right? Then I will clutch, I will fear, as you are describing. So the question then becomes, how do I honor this needed distance, which is a condition of possibility of actually loving that person properly? It's not that it's kind of taking away something from love, but to the contrary. It's making the love that doesn't fear kind of possible, and releases that possibility because the other is, I am not utterly dependent upon the other. So certain forms of independence are a condition of possibility of love, and nurturing that is important. Kierkegaard, for instance, when he writes about it, he thinks about worldly goods, anything that we might be invested in. You should have them around you like a cape, which at any time you can take off. Now that's a little bit too external, right? Because the people who we love and things that we love kind of go a little bit deeper into ourselves, but you see where he's headed with this. Because if suddenly, I mean, he does that in Either Or also with Margareta and Faust, right? If she invests herself completely in Faust, she's totally in his mercy. Because then she's gone. If he changes, she's gone, right? And that's what Kierkegaard thematizes and said, no. Your investments have to be such that if that betrays you, you're not gone. You are still established, and Kierkegaard thinks you can be established if you have fundamental reliance on God rather than of any object of your life. Put differently, if you love God above all things. Yeah, one kind of suffering that I did not talk about, and which maybe I should have because I think you've read today about it, is the suffering, which is not simply the case in the Christian faith, but for any cause that you stand, suffering that results often if you stand for something that is good in a situation where other people are invested in that not being the case. And in that sense, it's almost attachment and wanting to do good is an almost kind of a guarantee that there will be certain kinds of suffering because you'll live in the world where there is a contention about how one ought to live, what one ought to prioritize, whether that has to do with economic issues, whether that has to do with political issues, whole range of issues are involved in this. And one way to do that is to simply transpose the fulfillment to afterlife. And then that kind of helps you to bear suffering that you are undergoing today. Now, Christian tradition, along with Jewish tradition, I think monotheist traditions more generally, has for the most part pushed against it. At least it pushes against it in the text that you have read in the original text. It picks up the goodness of ordinary life, and then kind of arranges them in priorities. Faith, that is to say, your attachment to God, is more fundamental than anything else in the world. That's the story of Job, for instance, to take something from Hebrew Bible, who loses everything, and loses everything because there was a bet between God and Satan. Well, not quite bet, but something like it, right? Satan says to God, if you just have him lose everything and touch then his body, he's going to curse you. He's not going to worship you, Satan says to God, because the only reason why he worships God is because Job gets great goods of ordinary life. And the whole book is about how Job pushes and wins the bet on behalf of God, if you want to put it this way, that Job does not stand by the good for the goods of ordinary life that result from that. So there is something more important than the comforts that we have. I think that's a stable feature of monotheist traditions. That's a stable feature of the Christian tradition. And that's why the commitment is first to God, love God, and then love your neighbor. By awareness that you're bigger than your deeds, that you're not your deeds. Inability to forgive is at a kind of noetic level. There are kind of psychological level difficulties of forgiving kind of for the practical nature, right? And we all, in different ways, have those difficulties. But at a level of kind of perception of reality, it is partly related to simply reading ourselves as being nailed to our deed. We are our deed, and we can't let go of this somehow. If we we can't separate ourselves from our deed, and therefore we can't forgive ourselves, as we often cannot separate the deed from the other person, and forgive them. I think in the Gospel of or in the epistle of first epistle of John, I think you might have had reading from this. Maybe no. In one of the epistles of John, first epistle of John, it has a line which says that God is greater than our heart. Your heart tells you, I can't forgive you for having done this. Namely, heart isn't forgiving you for having done that. And God says, I have forgiven you. I see not your deed, I see you. And you are an object of love, and therefore you can be forgiven. And so there's a kind of certain freedom that this God's love toward us, irrespective of our deeds, gives us in regards to ourselves and also in regard to others. That's a great question, and if you ask me to draw that line, I wouldn't know how to draw. My hand would go like this all over the place, and I'll go from one side to the next, and wouldn't know how to make that distinction. I think that the one way to attend to that question, to answer that question, is to ask, well, is it possible to embrace the kind of sets of beliefs about form of the good life without believing in God? And I would say, yeah. I mean, generally, I think when I was younger, I thought that everything in my faith depended on my faith. And then I decided, that can be quite right, because I find myself sometimes, especially when I pray, and then I think it's not going anywhere further than that ceiling, this prayer, and suddenly I look back and I think, oh, my this faith is a kind of empty shell. There's nothing inside. And then I think, okay, so I say that I'm a Christian. What does that mean? Has it gone away right there in this experience? And then I've decided that actually, if God exists, and is love, then it can't depend all on my faith. It depends on God's coming to me and opening up the space of faith. I think God is prior to our beliefs in God, which is to say, and Christian theologians talk about this as something like a common grace, which is to say that as a result of God's presence in our lives, we as Christians would put, one can be, even without believing in God, prompted to do better things than those who believe in God do. So in that sense, I would say it's not dependent on the belief in God. Is it dependent on there being a reality that's love? I think so, but I'm not sure. Yeah, this is a wonderful question that you're asking, because in the certain kind of more popular Christian circles, there is a kind of a concept called servant leadership, and you might think, well, that's contradiction in terms, right? But the idea is that one, I think it's built on the passage from which you're drawing your comment, and that's about Jesus, who in the dispute, I think that's a passage, right? In dispute about his disciples, who's greatest among them, then he responds, the one is greatest who serves, and then he says, I am the example of that service, right? So that the service is the form of leadership in this context, right? And all leadership should then be defined through the idea of service rather than through the idea of self-aggrandizement. I think that makes sense in the kind of leadership literature that I have read as well. Kind of a striving to be the big cheese and so forth may not be quite, that's a terrible term, right? And comes from about 40 years ago, right? It's totally dated, whatever big, can be counterproductive, and there's something, at least to my taste and feeling, there's something not quite sufficiently humane about it.